So I'm going to turn it over to Audrey Kidwell, who's going to start us with the contract review. And what we'll do is we'll pause as we review each part of the contract after we review the sections to answer your questions. So to get the best use out of this call, we would recommend you having your contract package in front of you, including all of the exhibits, and to pull up that email that was included. So Audrey?
All right, welcome everybody. Can everyone see the overview of the Volunteer Generation Fund Standard Contract PowerPoint?
No.
I'm looking at an email. There we go. Now I can see it.
Okay.
And just a housekeeping tip, if you could please, everyone on the phone, mute your lines. We really found that that's helpful in keeping the background noise. So if you could please mute your lines, and then you can unmute them if you have a question.
I'm a guy that likes to pick out lunch every Saturday for my customers. Stop in to see me anytime. We're fine.
All right, let's get started. All right, so today we will be going over the contract packet. And so on Monday or Friday, I had emailed over all of this information. And so the first one is the actual Volunteer Florida Generation Fund Standard Contract was entered with your name and all of your grant amounts. And then it also included 6 exhibits. The first one is your original VGF grant proposal, budget, and budget narrative, and that is included with all of the clarifications that were made. Exhibit 2, Exhibit 3, and Exhibit 5 are budget templates, and we'll go over each of the individual ones momentarily. And then Exhibit 4 is the National Criminal History Check Status Form, and on that there are directions on how to complete it and insert everyone's information there. And then the last one, Exhibit 6, is the reporting guidance, which is all the information that we will request from you about your skills-based volunteers throughout the grant cycle. Right, so I'm going to turn it over to Kat to start with the actual Volunteer Generation Fund Standard Contract.
Thanks, Audrey. Well, this is our standard contract, so if you are a VGF grantee previously, this should look no different. I'm going to start with the provider agreement and just share some couple of high-level pieces. We do want to make sure you all read your contracts, that you share them with your grants management and finance team so that everyone does read it. And first and foremost, these funds are federal funds from the Corporation for National and Community Service, so they need to comply with the requirements of the National Community Service Act and Trust Act of 1990 and 93. So some of the specific guidelines that we'll get to, especially related to background checks and others, are in compliance and need to be in compliance with those federal service acts. We also fall under the state of Florida, so you'll see some state of Florida guidelines as well. Primarily, this will have to do with your budget and your reimbursement process, so I do want you to be aware of those two things. The provider, that's you, does need to attend the Volunteer Generation Fund trainings. Our first training will be March 31st to April 2nd in Orlando, Florida. We'll have a different discussion about the training, but I wanted to make you aware that that was a requirement for your program staff and finance staff, and that we anticipate a second really celebrational training happening in the summer, so that's pending. Related to the budget, this is a cash cost reimbursement contract, and those matching funds in cash or in kind are required and are stated in your approved budget. And we do submit, you do submit, and we document how the in-kind and match is used as well. The budget revision form is included in your contract, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. And some organizations do need to adjust their budget. Yours is pretty straightforward, so we prefer that not to occur this year, but there is a process for that. Reports, you'll have a separate exhibit where you're talking about reports, but I will share that we would expect a mid-cycle report and an end-of-the-year report. So those would be the primary reports that you would submit as a grantee programmatically, as well as your organization will participate in a pre- and a post-survey that will be online. There's some other reports required. related to finances. And I just ask if, Debbie, do you want to say anything about those financial reports?
Sure. The first one that we need to make sure that you do is the physical online training that's referenced in your contract. Whoever is going to be the lead for your program, as well as your financial person, needs to take these. You will not be able to print a certificate of completion for one of them, but you will need to send us an email stating that you have completed it and the date that you completed it. So please make sure you do those as soon as you get an executed contract, because we will not issue payment until we have certification that these have been completed.
Thanks, Debbie. And that's part of that federal funds, the Corporation for National Community Service element, is that by taking those fiscal online trainings, you'll then be familiar with some of those federal requirements. Okay? So I'm going to move down to partnership development, site agreements. I don't know that many of you will have these in place because the volunteers will be serving at your organization, but that is Section 8 and I related to training. Records and documentation, Section K, I would say to please be aware to keep everything associated with this grant for a period of 5 years after the termination. That's, again, a Volunteer Florida and CNCF requirement for record retention, is that you would be retaining those grant-related documents for that 5-year period. And the other piece I want to note, I'm not going to go through every section, but I do want you to read it, is the sponsorship section. It's essential as you brand the program in your website, in your written communication, in your events, that you have the statement that Volunteer Florida is the funder. So that's Section M in sponsorship. Logo usage is preferable, and our logo can be found on our website in TIFF, JPEG, and other forms. But we do want to make sure that the Volunteer Generation Fund and the services associated in your organization do have that Volunteer Florida Association. And I think I'm going to pause there for Section 1 highlight, and then move into commission. Actually, let me just pause there for Section 1. We have 2 more sections. I'll see if you all have any questions. Okay.
Hi, this is Natasha Hartsfield. I do have a quick question. Back to the finance and the fiscal online training. I'm going to be the grants manager on this, so I would then need to take that course, correct?
Natasha, are you going to be the one that is submitting the monthly invoice for reimbursement?
Yes.
Yes, you will need to take those classes.
Okay, and at the very back of this, it also has listed, or we're supposed to list, who is the programs or the provider program contact. Would that be me too and the fiscal contact? Or should our fiscal contact be our finance director here at the museum?
That should be whoever we need to reach out to if we have any questions regarding your contract or your reimbursement.
Does that answer your question, Natasha?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey guys, this is Mike Floyd from Computer Mentors. Just a quick question regarding the reimbursement. We submit them monthly, and then you guys are reimbursing us monthly, or is it going to be similar to prior periods where it was basically paid at the end? Just curious for a cash flow question.
No, Mike. The invoices will need to be submitted monthly for reimbursement. We will reimburse those within the 45 days after we receive a complete and accurate reimbursement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question. There are a lot of references to statutes. Is there a place where the actual written out statute is available for us to review?
Which statute are you referring to?
Well, throughout the contract, one of them is Florida Statute 403. 7065 and 287.05, and there are other references also. Chapter 119 of the Florida statute.
Yeah, yes, there is. I mean, at first I would say Google it because it should pull up that way. And then if you have a specific question about one of them, if you could email Audrey at volunteerflorida.org, we could send you that link.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. So moving on to commission agreements, that's section 2. Very brief, but to share that complete and accurate reimbursement invoices will be processed within 45 days. However, if that invoice is not timely or accurate, it may delay the reimbursement process. And our team will work with you on that. I think for some of our grantees, once they know the process and the right forms, it goes much more smoothly. But I will say sometimes there are some bumps in the beginning. And that is why it's really much more simple for you to have all of your costs stay in staff time, because then once that is documented, you'll have a process for the rest of the year. Technical assistance, Audrey Kidwell is our Volunteer Generation Fund grant manager. She'll be your primary person for that. And site visits, we do anticipate visiting and supporting your sites this year. Any questions about Section 2, Commission Agreement? Okay. Well, then I'm going to invite Debbie and Tracy to speak a bit about Section 3, which is Provider and Commission Mutual Agreement. This is the portion of your contract that does itemize the contract amount and the grantee share and the total contract. And maybe, Debbie, if you could review that.
Sure. So, first of all, the contract period is beginning on February 13th, which is Friday. And then the contract terminates on September 30th. So all of your expenses, your eligible expenses, must be incurred within that time period. And we talked about this early on. If you're looking at software updates or things of that nature, you need to do them early on. We want to see the use of that software throughout the grant period, not the last month or the last week of the grant period. So make sure you do those upgrades early on in the program. The contract that you received would show your total contract amount, which will be the amount that you are requesting from CNCS for reimbursement, as well as what you have indicated you will provide as match. It will also indicate the CNCS share, which will be the amount that is reimbursable to you, provided you submit allowable expenses. And then there is a grantee share, which is what you have indicated you will be providing as your match for the contract. Section 3 in here refers to, again, what you have referenced in the budget that you're going to contribute as match, whether that is cash or in-kind. Keep in mind that all in-kind contributions must be documented. So do we have any questions? Oh, you guys are easy this morning.
I do have a question. This is Mike Floyd from Computer Mentors. I do have a question.
Hey, Mike.
This one's probably going to be an offline question because it relates to me specifically. But looking back over the dates, I guess the dates for our contribution portion of the match should have been between the dates of February 13th and September 30th. And so the dollar amount that we're contributing as part of the salary portion of our match would obviously be less than what the annual, we used annual numbers is what I'm trying to get at. So that number would be slightly less because it's less months. Should I take that offline with Audrey to make sure that we've got that number correctly before we sign? Okay. So do you understand what I'm asking? I guess I'm not sure.
Yeah, because you used an annual salary instead of prorating it over the period of the contract.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it'll be slightly less than the number we gave, but I want to make sure that it's accurate. So at the end, we're not still trying to catch up to additional salary that would be paid in October, November, December.
Right. Yes. Please give us a call offline and let's get that squared away before we get too far into the contract. Because the other thing that you need to be aware of is if you stated a specific dollar amount as your match,
Yes.
we will hold you to that dollar amount. So if
Yes.
at the end of the grant period your match is short,
Yes.
we look to move eligible expenses over to match to cover the match. You are required to meet that match contribution. So if you've got questions, let's get them resolved up front. Let's do the budget revision form and a contract amendment if we have to do that, but let's get them squared away at the beginning of the contract, please.
Sure. I'll probably not after this call, but this afternoon I'll circle back to Audrey.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Yeah, Mike, good point. You do note that for all of you, it's not a full year contract. It is a contract period. If we receive continuation fund next year, which we hopefully will as the state of Florida, what we would anticipate is this contract period would be longer next year in that the year would start much earlier. But for this year, it is not a full 12 months.
All right. Thank you so much for that.
So then you see your contacts, Audrey and Janice, our Director of Finance and Accounting. As you execute this contract and provide it back to us, we do ask for a programmatic contact and fiscal contact. The programmatic person would be the primary person in charge of operating. Maybe it's your volunteer manager or others, and your fiscal contact would fit that definition that Debbie shared earlier. We also ask that you share with us the address of where the documents are stored, so that is also in your contract. And then we note that this agreement and all of its attachments referenced below, and those are the exhibits we'll be going over quickly, are all incorporated to the terms and conditions agreed in the contract. So in other words, all of those exhibits are binding and part of the contract as well. So we ask that when you're ready that you go ahead and sign this and return this to us. We will execute it here and provide you a copy as well. Okay. Any questions about the standard contract before we move into your exhibits?
Hi, this is Katie with United Way Manatee. Can you please tell us the receipt deadline for this contract? I believe it was the 20th, but I wasn't sure if that was have it in your hands by the 20th or have it postmarked by the 20th.
We'd like to have that back by the 20th. The sooner we have it, the sooner everything gets executed. So if postmarked by the 20th is acceptable, but we really would like to have it back by then.
Thank you.
This is Pam Miller with the Salvation Army in Tampa. We at the Area Command are not authorized to sign contracts, so this contract will have to be hand-delivered to our divisional headquarters, which is in Tampa, Lutz, and then they have a board meeting next Tuesday, which it should be approved and then signed. We'll pick it back up. So is this an electronic? Can we submit electronically and then postmark the original signed copy to you by the 20th? Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, Pam, that would be fine. That would be. And so some of you do have these processes within your board and your district that look different than other organizations. So if any of the rest of you as grantees have a similar process that might delay, I would say just to communicate with Audrey, your program manager, on that.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, this is Katie again with United Way. I was going to ask this offline, but it might pertain to other people on the call today. We use a vendor for our payroll services. We use Progressive Employers, and I wanted to make sure that the payroll register that we receive from them will satisfy the requirements for payroll and fringe benefits that are necessary for reporting, in addition to, individual timesheets that will be kept.
That's a great question.
Katie, this is Debbie. We would want to see a copy of that before we would say that it would meet the requirements that we need. So if you have one that that you could send to Audrey for us to look at, that would be great. So we'll just know what it looks like and make sure that it has everything on it that we would need for the reporting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. right, great questions, everyone. So now we are going to move on to the next slide, which is your grant proposal.
Yeah. All right. So thank you again for submitting your applications and working with us during the clarification process. I know it can be a little tedious, but I think they all turned out really wonderful. And so what we wanted to send it as an exhibit, so you know that you're under contract to do what you put into the proposal. And so you really need to be familiar with the content that you wrote in your proposal, but more specifically with the budget, the service location, and the performance measures that you opted into. And so, again, use this proposal, and we will also be looking at it throughout the year as kind of the foundation for your program year. And so, again, if there are any questions or clarifications, you can definitely let me know, and we can work on it throughout the time. But, again, what is in the grant proposal with the clarifications is what we will be holding you accountable for. Are there any questions on that? All right. We will turn it over to Exhibit 2, which is the budget template, and Debbie will be going over this.
Okay, the budget template really is going to be for use only if you have to do a budget revision. So I'm going to talk about both the budget revision form and the budget template. So if you have to do a budget revision, if you have to make a change to your grantee share, or if for some reason you realize you're not going to be able to utilize the full $10,000 of the grant, and you have to do a budget revision, you're going to complete the budget revision form, which has 3 columns. It has your original budget, which is in your application. It has the budget changes that you want to make, and then the revised budget amount. So once you complete that budget revision request form, then you would complete the budget template, which is going to show the new numbers as far as what we will put in with your application. So you'll show the new amounts for your CNCS, the new amount for grantee, and the new total based on the budget revision form. These are all in Excel. They should automatically calculate for you. If they don't, give us a call and let us know, but everything should calculate automatically. Please make sure that you sign and date both the budget revision request form and the budget template when you submit those for review. Any questions? And just let me say, for anything that's budget related, the budget revision request form, the budget template, or your monthly invoice and supporting documentation, those all need to be submitted to PER@volunteerflorida.org. That is the mailbox that our finance team uses for anything that is related to our grant. So again, that address is PER@volunteerflorida.org.
I hate to interrupt. This is Deanna with Brace. On the slide, you have PER@volunteerflorida.org.
Mm-hmm. PER.
No, it's on. You said PR, but on the slide it says PER.
Right. PER@volunteerflorida.org is the correct address. If I misspoke, I apologize, but it is PER@volunteerflorida.org, just like it is on the slide. Thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
We don't want things to get lost.
For sure.
Any other questions?
Mike Floyd from Computer Mentors again. The Exhibit 2, the budget template, that's not required once we're, if we don't have any revisions, we're not required to send that to you, right?
That is correct, Mike. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. We are moving on to Exhibit 4, the National Criminal History Check. And so Kat will be going over that.
Thanks, Audrey. So to share with you a little bit about the National Criminal History Check form, these are federal funds, as you know, from the Corporation for National Community Service, and therefore any individual that is covered by the federal side, the CNCS side, or your match side needs to have a 3-part background check completed. I'm going to walk you through this form. I expect that many of you will have questions that will be specific to your organization's process for doing background checks, and we're going to walk you through that. So for this, this form, the criminal history status check form, should be turned back to our finance office within 60 days. And the most important thing to be aware of is the National Sex Offender Public Registry, NSOPR. That needs to be completed before you can start charging any staff time to this grant. So this is a very easy name-based check that would take you about 2 minutes to do. So I would suggest that when we get off the phone today, everyone hang up and you Google NSOPR and you complete that check on any staff that will be paid for out of grant funds or your match side, or that you think might be paid out of funds in any side. Because this is probably one of the most important things related to payment is that the federal restrictions, we can't reimburse any cost for any of those staff positions until this is completed. So you would put the individual's name in, you run the check, it will print off with a date, and you would include that one-page print off in your grant file for this contract. You want to make sure that all of the U.S. states and territories are included. Sometimes when you run the NSOPR check, it'll say, Michigan's not available today, or another state. And you would just resubmit that name check again until all 50 states and then territories are included. It's a very simple thing to do and easy, and it is a requirement. So I would say when we get off the phone today, go ahead and do that. For this form, the form that you'll be submitting here, Exhibit 4, you would write down the name of the staff person, the position title, when they have been hired or enrolled, and then you're going to share with us what the status is of their FBI fingerprint history check, their National Sex Offender Public Registry check, and their State of Florida residency criminal history check. And so, for example, that NSOPW needs to be completed before any cost can be recaptured. So that date should be like today's date. Your fingerprint and state of residency, what you might need to say there is that you've initiated it and put the date with which it's been initiated. When we monitor or do site visits with your program, we would make sure that these have been completed because all 3 pieces do need to be completed. Some of you have these processes already in place. For some of you, these will be a bit different than what you already do. And Audrey and I and our entire team will work with you to find an appropriate vendor and an appropriate process. But I will say for everyone, the NSOPW check remains the same, and that would be something everyone can get done right away. What questions can I answer for you on that?
This is Dragon
with United Way of Manatee. I just wanted to ask if we've already been background checked previously. Is that sufficient? Can we submit a prior background check?
We'll probably need to talk with you about that and the timing of when that was done and some other factors. So yes or no. I can't possibly, but possibly not. But the NSOPW check needs to be done regardless.
Right. Okay.
This is Mike from Computer Mentors. If our NSOPR check was done recently, can that be submitted? I know we did some within the last 6 months or so, maybe even less than that, 4 months maybe. Will those suffice, or do you need new ones done?
For the NSOPW, for all of our grantees every year, we do recommend that you just run that check again. It's a low-burden check. Okay. For the 3-part overall background check, if there hasn't been what the Corporation for National Community Service calls a gap in service of 120 days or greater, there is not a need to rerun the entire 3-part background check. So as a past grantee, that might be related to you. But we do, for all of our grantees, recommend that they do the NSOPW or R every year.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Jaya Kong from Community Youth Development, and I was just wondering, our program will be starting mid-February. However, we will be bringing on additional part-time staff that will be covered by grant funds this summer, past the 60 days of the program start date. Will that cause any issues as far as the NSOPR getting everything in, I guess, by that deadline?
No, that's fine. You just update the Exhibit 4 form as those new staff come on.
Okay.
Other questions? Well, I know that you have them and that they might be related to your individual organization. So please let us know those questions earlier rather than later, and we'll work with you on solutions for that. I think probably of any of the questions and challenges that our VCF grantees have had previously, the three-part background check did offer a lot of opportunity for discussion and learning together. So just look to your Volunteer Florida team and we'll help you through that.
All right. Moving on to Exhibit 5, the Periodic Expense Report.
Okay, the fund. So every month, by the 15th of the month, you will submit your invoice to us, and this invoice, again, is in Excel. It should calculate automatically for you. What you need to make sure that you do is, on this form, the CNCS side, the column for CNCS, is the dollars that you expect reimbursement for. The grantee is those that you are including as match. Please make sure that you sign it and date it. Along with this form, you're going to send us all of the supporting documentation for all of the expenses that you have listed, whether CNCS or grantee. If you're including personnel, you need to include payroll registers, salary warrants, timesheets, anything that supports those hours that that individual has worked on this grant. Timesheets must clearly identify the hours that the individual worked as well as the hours that they worked for VGF. So make sure that your timesheets are capturing that. It can't just capture a total number. It has to clearly identify the hours that were related to the VGF grant. If you're claiming health insurance or workers' comp, you're going to need to provide the documentation of what those expenses were as well as proof of payment. Transportation, keep in mind that we will only reimburse at the rate of 0.445 per mile. If you're paying a higher rate and your policy allows that, you can claim the difference as part of your match, but we will not reimburse at that higher rate. Technology and equipment, again, we would look to see those purchases early on into the contract. You'll need to provide the invoice from the organization that you purchased from, as well as proof of payment to them. The same with other program operating costs. Everything has to have an invoice showing what the cost was. If you're splitting the cost between VGF and another program, you need to clearly identify what portion of that invoice is considered VGF, and you would need to provide proof of payment for that. And again, this is for CNCS cost and for your grantee match. And again, the address for that is per@volunteerflorida.org. So, any questions?
I have a question. This is Natasha at the Tallahassee Museum. Do you all have a timesheet specific to this grant, or should we just include our timesheets?
We will be happy to send out a sample, Natasha, that you can look at and see if it'll work.
Okay.
Audrey's making a note to get that out to you. Again, if you already have timesheets, you just need to make sure that they clearly identify the total hours worked and those hours that were related to the VGF grant. But we will certainly get you out a template to look at.
Thank you.
Yeah. Certainly. Any other questions? Okay.
All right, and we will be moving over to the last exhibit, Exhibit 6, the reporting guidance.
Yeah. Thanks, Audrey. So reporting, we want to give you a sense of what you'll be asked to report on this year. And again, that would be midterm and end of the year. Some of this is required CNCF reporting, particularly the demographics, and other pieces are related to this grant, and some may not apply to you. So I'm going to start on Exhibit 6 and work through this with you. You will likely be submitting these reports in an electronic format, likely through a survey tool or a different platform. So what you see here is, unlike the budget template, it's not a template. It is a guide for you so that you know what will be asked of you. We will be providing those templates in the future. So the first is demographics. That's Section 1. We note to please not to duplicate any volunteers or numbers that are associated with other streams of national service. So that would be AmeriCorps, AmeriCorps State National, AmeriCorps Vista, Senior Corps, RSVP. If any of your organizations have those programs, you want to make sure that the volunteers that are generated through this grant are not duplicative of those other streams of service. So you'll share with us the number of skills-based volunteers engaged and the hours served by those skills-based volunteers. We want to know if those skills-based volunteers are new and how many hours those new skills-based volunteers served. And the remaining 3 areas of the demographics, that may be something that you capture through your volunteer tracking systems. And if so, we want to know the number of disadvantaged children and youth who served as skills-based volunteers, the number of individuals enrolled in degree programs, and those number of individuals that were born between a particular time, those baby boomer generation volunteers. If your systems track this, if your systems do not track this, we are not asking you to create new systems for this. So what we will be asking is the number of skills-based volunteers, the hours, and the information around those that were new. On the second section, activities, this is basically the section that you'll share what has been happening throughout the first half of the year. What's gone well? What have volunteers been engaged in? So that's more of a narrative summary. Then Section 3 is for those of you, and only for those of you that opted into the STEM or My Brother's Keeper initiative. So for those of you that opted into these 2 areas, you'll see some of those same language in there where we do want to track the number of skills-based volunteers used in STEM-based programs and their hours, and similarly with My Brother's Keeper. So again, that's more of a narrative report as well, which may or may not apply to those to you. So you'll be asked to submit this twice a year, one at mid-grant, midway through, and then one at the end of the year. And it'll likely be through an electronic or online format. So it is not a lot of reporting because really the goal of these funds is to support generating those skills-based volunteers to meet your critical community needs. And in addition to that, we'll ask your organization to complete a pre- and a post survey that will be online, and it'll measure the degree to which the volunteer generation funds increased your capacity as an organization to manage volunteers. So you will have a pre- and a post test as well. The pre-test link will be sent very soon because we want to have a sense of where things stand now earlier in the year. And the last thing I want to mention is that these funds through the Corporation for National and Community Service do require that volunteer demographics are captured and tracked. You'll see that in the italicized language at the end of Exhibit 6. And you have systems for doing this, but I want to point this out that Volunteer Florida does require and anticipate that grantees will be tracking volunteer demographics according to your systems, and that we may request that information at some point in time. So please continue to use the systems you do have to track volunteer demographics. Any questions on the reporting? Okay. Well, Well, we learned so much about the great stories and impact of VGF grantees last year. We are streamlining it this year so that what you do give us is twice a year instead of more than twice a year, and we'll work with you on any questions you have.
And then lastly, before we go, we just wanted to leave it with some lingering questions or comments that you guys wanted to share.
This is Deanna with Brace. I have a question in regards to the volunteer reporting. You all start out by saying that not to duplicate volunteer numbers that are tracked in other streams of national service funding. We also receive funding for CERT and Citizen Corps, and we track volunteers in that funding stream as well. So the ones that we track for that funding stream, are you saying that they should not be counted or duplicated in this?
You know, I think we'll explore that with you offline a bit, but generally know that these funds are really meant to support and engage and increase your volunteer base. We just want to make sure they're not commingled with other CNCS funds.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Could you guys also talk a little bit about the upcoming training?
Sure. Well, I will speak to that just briefly. First of all, it's going to be awesome, and we're really excited to welcome you to the wonderful city of Orlando. We will spend a couple days together. You will get to know one another as a group, who you are as a cohort. You will share best practices. We will bring in trainers related to STEM and My Brother's Keepers, and we'll also be engaging some of the fantastic trainers through FAVRM and other sources that will lead you on a path of how do you become better at what you already do, which is volunteer management. What are some really key asset-based strategies that you can use? So you'll be getting a lot of that content from external trainers as well as specific content for VGF from your Volunteer Florida team. And we will have a lot of fun together. So we'll have more information for you in the near future.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
For the training, this is Green in United Way Manatee, will both the fiscal agent and the program director need to attend that training?
Great question. Thanks so much for asking that. Yes, because we will have a special track for those fiscal managers during that training. So that would be important. And I anticipate, though, for the fiscal folks, it's just one of those days that would be applicable to your fiscal folks, not the entire training. But we'll get that agenda out to you very soon. So yes, but not required for the full time.
Great. Thank you.
Kat, this is Joe at Franklin's Promise.
Hi, Joe.
Do you have the dates yet? Because that'll be critical for us.
We sure do. It's in your contract. March 31st to April 2nd.
March what, dear?
March 31st through April 2nd. In Orlando.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
We can't wait to see you there, Joe, and everyone else. So any other questions? All right, well, we look forward to supporting your incredible work this year. Thank you for all of your quick movement on this grant, and we will see you in just a few weeks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hey. Bye.